Hi, welcome back. Mark Kelsey here from C3 Global Team. And we're doing this devotional series on Luke 15. This is part 3 to that. We've already done 2 parts. We looked at the fact that the gospel is not just for unbelievers, the gospel is for believers. And in the first part, we looked at the parable of the lost sheep and representing who the gospel is for, which obviously is all of us. It's every one of us, everyone in the world is a lost sheep. And Jesus left the security of heaven, the great shepherd, and came to rescue us. In the second part of Luke 15, we see the story of the lost coin. Interesting, the lost coin was not lost in the field like the sheep, was lost in the house. And often people get saved by God and found, but then they get lost in church. And church just becomes a thing that they do. They become just attending. And those beautiful, rich, gracious gifts on the inside of them are disengaged. When really God wants every gift, every life to be part of the covenant of God, causing a healthy church to grow and to be effective to reaching the community. And in this third part of Luke 15, we see the story of what we traditionally know as the prodigal son. I love what Tim Keller talks about in his book, The Prodigal God. He says the word prodigal, even though not actually used in the actual text itself, could just as easily refer to God, because the word prodigal means extravagant. And here we see the picture of an extravagant God, an extravagant father who liberally gave all that he had to the younger son. Because this last bit is the parable, and 2 sons are mentioned. The younger son, who left the home, took the inheritance and squandered it all, but eventually came to his senses and returned to the father. And it's a actually incredible picture of all of us, almost like similar to the first part of Luke 15, where God came to save all of us. And it's the picture of what happens at the end of that story, where the father went down to the driveway and his arms are open and the prodigal son is returning, and there's zero judgment. It's all grace. It's the love of God. And it's a picture of all of us as lost sons, lost daughters who would return to the Father. And when we return to the Father, when our hearts are turned, there's actually no judgment, but just the love of God and the grace of God. But the great thing is, in this last part of Luke 15, the second part of that story goes to the other brother, the older brother, who didn't leave the house, stayed in the house. And when the younger brother returned, the older brother didn't know that he returned. When he eventually saw that he did, he saw that the father put on a party and a celebration and was very upset and very angry. So this part of the parable, this part of Luke 15, really is the story of not one lost brother, but 2 lost brothers. But they were lost for different reasons. The younger brother was lost because he was sinning and was far from the father and needed to come back. But the older brother was just as lost, because he was attempting to connect with the father and please the father out of moral conformity and trying to do the right thing, and in doing the right thing actually lost the point of what it was all about. So that when the younger brother returned, he really wasn't in that place of receiving like the father was. So interesting, the younger brother represents the lost world, which has lost their way. But the older brother, or the church, represents a lost church, and they've lost their mission, or we've lost the mission. And so once again, we see this picture of what the role, this part of the gospel is, what is the role of the church? What are we meant to be in this? Are we meant to be just passive, sitting, waiting for lost sons and daughters to return? Or are we meant to be more engaged, more mission-minded in this? And of course, I would argue that we're meant to be far more mission-minded, because in the other 2 parts of Luke 15, somebody went out and left and searched for the lost thing. The great shepherd left the 99 for the 1 sheep. The woman searched for the lost coin. But in this particular story, it's interesting that no one is mentioned. No one left the house to go and search for the younger brother. But what would appear to be the case is that it's the older brother's job, it is the church's job to really leave the house and go and search for the younger brother. Because what we discovered in this is that it's the father's heart to receive people back to him, but it's the church's job to rescue. And our job is to literally go and find lost kids and cause them to come back and to receive and to find and accept the reception of the Father, which is an awesome thing. So in many ways, the church has possibly failed in these areas. And there are three things that sometimes we fail on. Number one, we fail to launch. In other words, we fail to leave. We stay in the security of our services, of our religious activity. But really, the mission is not the church. The mission is the world. And if church happens for an hour a week, then really the other 167 hours of the week are as much about the church as that 1 hour in church on Sunday. And we've framed church around our services, around our gatherings, and around our activities. But really, that's one aspect of it. That is to encourage the saints to really release their gifting, which is the second part of the Luke 15, and go out into the world and be the light, be the salt, be the love out into the community. So in many ways, we've failed to launch. Our second failure often as a church is we've failed to embrace. When the younger brother came back, the father embraced the younger son, but the older brother didn't. And it's one thing to receive the love of God, but it's another thing to receive the love of the church. For brothers and sisters to embrace people, whatever stage and whatever part of life they've come from, and they're going to come in messy, messed up, not transformed, quite the opposite. And I think if the church realizes that our job is to embrace in whatever life stage that people have found themselves in, whatever trouble they've found themselves in, that's the job of the church. We need to be embracing people and then walk with them in a journey of transformation, journey of change, a journey of the gifts and the life and the grace and the restoration of God coming back into their lives. And the third failure possibly is that we've failed to celebrate. When the younger brother returned and the party happened, it says the older brother said, "What is that sound?" One version says, he said, "What is that noise?" He lost what party was. He didn't even know that there was a celebration. He didn't even call it a celebration. He called it noise. And I think churches need to be a place full of celebration. When anybody comes back to the Lord, when anybody has a breakthrough, when anybody even takes a step towards God and towards being embraced by the Father, the church should be a place of incredible celebration. My personal opinion is that the loudest, happiest stage of our church services should be the altar call, the place where people are responding to Christ, and for our hearts to be rejoicing. And of course, that's the theme of Luke 15, is that when one sinner repents, heaven celebrates. And I think that should be reflected in the humanity of the church community, is that we should be celebrating, cheering, and laughing and celebrating all that God has done, and not wait till there's hundreds of those, but every single person that makes one turn towards the Lord, that the church responds in such a party, fun, celebrative way. And so here we see what an amazing unfolding of Luke 15, where we see the parable in those three parts: the parable of the lost sheep, lost coin, and lost brother. But really, it's two lost brothers. Unpackaged in this, we see the beautiful depth and layers to the gospel, and what it actually means for who it is for, who God uses, and what the church's role is in this. Trust you've enjoyed this, and really looking forward to seeing you next time. God bless.